This isn't just a story, it's the kind you'll think about at 2 a.m. If you're ready for the truth they never saw coming, hit that subscribe button now. And if something hits home, drop a like and tell me your thoughts in the comments, because stories like this deserve to be heard. The dining room should have been a sanctuary, a place where family gathered to share food and warmth. Instead, that night it became a battlefield. My mother, Margaret, leaned forward across the gleaming table, her lips tight, eyes cutting like glass. "Your achievements don't matter, Olivia," she hissed. "Natalie's the only daughter worth our pride." The fork in my hand froze halfway to my mouth. The air thickened, pressing down on my chest, suffocating in its weight. For years, I had endured their favoritism, sat through endless dinners while they showered Natalie with applause for her smallest, most ordinary accomplishments. But in that moment, something inside me snapped. Not a crack that could be taped back together, but a clean, permanent break. I set my fork on the plate, lifted my eyes, and locked onto Margaret's glare. "Then you'll never see me again." The silence afterward felt alive, like thunder gathering in the distance. My father, David, didn't defend me. He kept his gaze buried in his plate, chewing as though my words were poison. Natalie smirked, basking in her role as their golden child, relishing the dagger they had just twisted into me. They thought I would remain their background character, the invisible daughter who carried burdens without complaint. But they were wrong. What came after that night didn't just fracture the glossy image of a perfect family, it set it ablaze, leaving only ashes and secrets they never imagined would surface. Growing up in our household was like living inside a theater production. Natalie played the star, while I was nothing more than a stage prop, present only when convenient. From the beginning, Natalie was their sun. Every careless doodle, every clumsy dance step was bathed in their light. I was the shadow orbiting that glow, my own accomplishments swallowed whole. At 7, I won a school-wide spelling bee, clutching a cheap golden trophy that, to me, felt priceless. David barely lifted his eyes from his newspaper. "That's nice, Olivia," he muttered, already flipping the page. That same week, Natalie scribbled a lopsided butterfly in art class. Margaret framed it, hung it in the front hallway, and invited neighbors over to marvel at her artistic prodigy. I stared at that frame for hours, my own trophy already shoved into the back of a drawer. Birthdays told the same story. Mine brought plain, practical gifts, a used sweater, a notebook, maybe a $10 gift card with a half-hearted, "Love, Mom and Dad." Natalie's birthdays? A spectacle. Balloons in her favorite shades, cakes shaped to match her latest obsession, expensive gadgets she hadn't even asked for. At 13, I got a rusty second-hand bike that squeaked louder than the neighborhood dogs. 2 years younger, Natalie received a brand new laptop loaded with software. When I asked why, Margaret's answer never changed. "Natalie's special, Olivia. Don't be selfish." I brought home straight A's, staying up until dawn studying under dim lamps. Their response was always the same, a distracted good work, followed by gushing over Natalie's potential, despite her failing grades and skipped homework. When she passed a single test, they threw her a celebration dinner, praising her perseverance. It wasn't just unfair. It was suffocating, a slow erasure of my existence. Family gatherings only magnified the injustice. Relatives asked about school, and David would beam about Natalie's latest recital or her creativity in some half-finished art project. I sat silently, invisible, chewing my food as the table clapped for her mediocrity. Deep inside, I longed for their approval so badly it burned. I thought if I worked harder, if I won awards, earned scholarships, aced exams, they'd finally see me. But no matter how much I achieved, I remained the spare daughter, expected to fend for myself. Natalie was their treasure. I was their workhorse. Yet their neglect gave me something unexpected: resilience. Natalie learned dependency. I learned strength. By 14, the truth was undeniable. I was on my own. I took a part-time job at a local coffee shop, wiping counters, steaming milk, scrubbing floors, saving every tip in a locked box under my mattress. I couldn't rely on my parents for anything. Asking meant hearing, "Money's tight," right before watching Natalie flaunt brand new sneakers. 8 months of saving bought me a used phone with a cracked screen. When I showed it to Margaret, she only shrugged. Smart choice. 2 weeks later, Natalie unwrapped the newest iPhone for school projects. School finances were no different. I filled out scholarship forms alone, writing essays at 2 a.m. with bloodshot eyes. David's only advice: don't expect handouts. College is expensive. Yet when Natalie begged for a $65,000 a year private art school, they hired consultants, took out loans, and told her, "We'll make it work." At 16, I bought a rusty Chevy with 210,000 miles. It coughed and rattled, but it was mine, paid for with my own sweat. That same year, Natalie received a sleek SUV, wrapped in a giant bow, blasted all over social media with hashtags like #ProudParents. I parked my Chevy down the block so her friends wouldn't laugh. Their message was crystal clear. Natalie was the future. I was just background labor. But what they didn't know was this: every slight they delivered only made me sharper, stronger, harder to break. College gave me one last chance to hope they'd change. I maintained a 3.95 GPA, made the dean's list every semester, and worked 2 jobs. Professors praised me. Classmates leaned on me. I called home, thrilled to share news of a prestigious internship at a tech startup. Margaret's reply? "That's nice, Olivia. Did you hear Natalie's designing a mural?" It stung. Natalie's C-average and abandoned projects always made headlines in our family, while my milestones barely registered. When she sold a doodle for $25, they threw her a dinner. When I was promoted to project lead, I got a flat. That's great. One Thanksgiving, I began telling relatives about my internship campaigns. David cut me off mid-sentence. "Have you seen Natalie's sketches? She has real talent." The room shifted to her, leaving me stabbing cold stuffing with my fork, invisible yet again. But their neglect lit a fire. I stopped chasing their love. Instead, I chased success, so undeniable, they'd choke on their own silence. Graduation day should have been my crowning moment. 4 years of relentless work, honors in business, top of my class. I reserved front row seats, sent reminders, offered to cover hotel costs. Margaret promised, "We'll be there, Olivia. We wouldn't miss it." But just before the ceremony, my phone buzzed with her text. "Sorry, sweetie. Natalie's meeting a gallery owner. Huge opportunity for her. We'll celebrate later. Proud of both our girls. Zoxo." The words blurred as my stomach sank. My family chose Natalie's coffee shop meeting over my graduation. When my name was called, I crossed the stage alone. Around me, families cheered with flowers and banners. My 3 seats remained empty, glaring back at me like a void. The dean shook my hand warmly. "Outstanding work, Olivia." I smiled for him, but inside, I was hollow. Afterward, classmates posed for photos with their families. I slipped away quietly, diploma in hand, driving my rattling Chevy home. That drive broke me, but it also rebuilt me. I stopped waiting for their pride. I would build a life where their absence meant nothing. After graduation, I cut ties. No calls, no holiday visits, no last-minute attempts at approval. I drowned myself in work, 80-hour weeks at my tech job, late nights studying real estate, finance, and investments. My apartment was bare, a mattress on the floor, a thrift store chair, a wheezing laptop. I ate ramen, skipped outings, and saved every cent. While Natalie posted rooftop selfies with hashtags like #LivingMyBestLife, I devoured market trends until dawn. 6 months later, I bought my first property, a rundown triplex with $20,000 in savings and a brutal high-interest loan. It was a wreck, leaking roof, cracked walls, faulty wiring. Contractors quoted me prices I couldn't pay, so I taught myself through YouTube. I bled, I sweated, I cried. But I rebuilt it. The first tenants wrecked a unit and skipped rent, costing me thousands. Lesson learned: screen carefully, trust slowly. By year's end, the triplex brought in $900 a month. Small, yes, but mine. I reinvested every dollar, buying more properties, 1 brick at a time, turning their rejection into my empire. My family barely noticed the life I was building. On the rare occasions I visited, conversation always drifted back to Natalie's latest venture. A blog that barely scraped together 12 views, or a scarf line that never sold a single piece. When I tried to share my first property purchase, Margaret barely blinked. "That's nice," she said, her voice flat. Then, without missing a beat, she pivoted. "Natalie's pitching a pop-up gallery next week." That was the moment I stopped sharing. Their indifference no longer crushed me, it fueled me, burning inside like a quiet fire that grew hotter every time they dismissed me. By 24, that fire had transformed into an empire. I owned 6 rental properties, each one producing steady cash flow. I refinanced with strategy, negotiated with contractors like a shark, and spotted deals others overlooked. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving, a force they couldn't even see. But at home, I was still invisible. At Christmas dinner that year, I mentioned buying my 6th property, a duplex fully leased and already profitable. David didn't look up from his plate of turkey. "Don't overextend yourself, Olivia. Real estate's risky." Then he immediately shifted the spotlight back to Natalie and her Etsy shop, a store that had sold exactly 2 bracelets in 6 months. The family cooed over her like she'd launched a global brand. "Natalie's gifts that year?" "A brand new MacBook, a designer handbag, a spa weekend package." "Mine?" "A $25 gift card to a discount store." Margaret handed it to me with a smile that felt like a knife. "You're so practical, Olivia." I burned inside, but I stayed silent. My resolve hardened like steel. The cracks in their perfect world began to show soon after, subtle at first, then undeniable. Natalie's ventures collapsed one by one. The blog abandoned, the scarf shop shut down, her prized SUV repossessed after months of missed payments. At family dinners, their praise for her grew thin, their voices strained as if even they struggled to believe the script they'd been reciting for years. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet. I built in silence. By 26, I owned 15 properties, pulling in more than I earned at my full-time job as a marketing manager. I had mastered loans, flips, and tenant management with a precision they never expected from the daughter they once ignored. My life was disciplined, still driving my rattling Chevy, still eating peanut butter sandwiches, still reinvesting every single dollar. Then, a twist came that I never saw coming. A colleague mentioned a local business journal searching for young entrepreneurs to feature. On a whim, I submitted my story, expecting nothing. Weeks later, the magazine released its cover story. Olivia Harper, 26, builds $2 million real estate empire before 30. There I was, front and center, standing in front of a renovated 8-unit complex, my smile confident but cautious. The article laid it all bare: self-taught, self-funded, the girl no one believed in who became impossible to ignore. I didn't send the issue to my family, but a cousin did. Then my phone exploded. "David, Olivia saw the article. Can we meet?" "Natalie, wow, you're killing it. Let's collab, your properties, my designs." "Margaret, we're so proud, honey. Come home, let's celebrate." Suddenly, I was the golden child. But I wasn't fooled. Their pride wasn't real, it was desperation. And I was about to find out just how deep it ran. I agreed to dinner, curious to see how far they would go. The table was set with Margaret's finest china, but the atmosphere was heavy, suffocating, like a storm waiting to break. Margaret opened with honeyed words. "We always knew you'd do big things, Olivia." David followed, his smile tight, forced. "You're our rock, always so driven." Then Natalie slid a tablet across the table. The screen showed a shoddy pitch deck, slides filled with typos and clip art. "I've got a vision," she said, voice shaking as she tried to sound confident. "Your rentals, my branding, we dominate the market." I almost laughed, but before I could, the truth spilled out. David's voice cracked as he spoke, eyes fixed on his wine glass. "My construction business is bankrupt. We owe $300,000 on the house, or we lose it next month." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "Too perfect, too practiced. We need you, Olivia. Family sticks together, right?" Natalie leaned in, her face pale with panic. "I'll work for you, Olivia. I'll prove I'm worth it." My heart pounded, not with sympathy, but with something colder, clearer, power. They needed me now, after decades of dismissing me. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch, their desperation hanging in the air like a noose. "Do you remember my graduation?" I asked, my voice calm but sharp. "When you skipped it for Natalie's gallery pitch? Or when you said my success was meaningless, that Natalie was the only daughter who mattered?" Margaret's face drained of color, her hands trembling. David stayed silent, eyes locked on his drink. Natalie whispered, "That was a mistake." "No," I said, my tone like ice. "It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. You chose her, every time. You built her up, you let her fail, and now you're drowning in her failures. That's your mess. Not mine." Margaret reached for my hand, tears spilling. "We'll pay you back, with interest. We'll sign over the house. Please, Olivia, don't let us lose everything." Natalie's voice cracked. desperation breaking through her mask. "I'll do anything, Olivia. I'm sorry." I stood, placed cash for my meal on the table, and looked at them one last time. "You had years to see me. You didn't. I'm done." I walked out, their stunned faces burning into my memory. But the night wasn't over. A twist still waited for me. Driving home, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from an unknown number. Curious, I pressed play. It was Natalie. Her voice was low, venomous. "You think you're so smart, Olivia, cutting us off. You'll regret this. I know things about you, things you don't want out." My pulse quickened. What could she possibly mean? I'd lived cleanly, worked relentlessly, kept my life private. But her words gnawed at me, planting a seed of doubt I couldn't shake. The next morning, I found an envelope slipped under my apartment door. Inside was a grainy photo of me at 19, at a college party I barely remembered, holding a drink, laughing with a stranger. A note was attached. "You're not so perfect. Help us, or this goes public." My stomach twisted. It was nothing, just a harmless moment, but in our small town, rumors could spread like wildfire. Natalie wasn't asking anymore. She was playing dirty. And I realized this fight wasn't about money anymore. It was personal. But I didn't panic. I adapted. I remembered their prized possession, Natalie's SUV. A status symbol. Their pride and joy. I'd overheard David bragging about it for years, but I knew the truth. Their finances were collapsing. Missed payments, loans in default, credit cards maxed out. Using a burner email, I tipped the lender with public records I'd dug up online. 3 days later, Natalie's Instagram story said it all. Betrayed by snakes. The repo truck had come. Her SUV was gone. But I wasn't finished. Their humiliation at that dinner table deserved a public echo. I sent an anonymous submission to a local gossip blog. Family ignores daughter's success, worships failing sibling. I even attached an old photo from one of those dinners, me, silent in the corner, while Natalie basked in attention for a doodle on a napkin. The post spread like wildfire in town. Comments poured in, tearing into my family for their favoritism. Natalie's social media bled followers. Their perfect family image crumbled. But still, her threat lingered. And I knew Natalie wasn't finished. A week later, I came home and noticed something was wrong before I even touched the handle. My apartment door was cracked open. My chest tightened as I stepped inside. Nothing was missing, at least not visibly, but the air felt disturbed, heavy, as if someone had just been there. My desk was in disarray, drawers yanked out, bank statements and property deeds scattered like confetti after a storm. My laptop sat on the table, still glowing, open to my email. Someone had been inside my home, and only one group of people had the spare keys, my family. Rage and fear tangled in my throat as I dialed David. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm, too calm. "Did you break into my place?" I demanded. He chuckled, smooth as oil. "Why would I do that, Olivia?" But beneath the evenness of his tone, I heard it, an edge, a lie. The following day, whispers reached me at work. A colleague leaned in, her eyes full of quiet pity. "People are saying things about your past." And then I knew. Natalie had made her move. A doctored version of that college photo, the one of me laughing, a drink in my hand, was circulating online, twisted into a story of recklessness I barely recognized. She'd taken one harmless memory and weaponized it. But Natalie underestimated me. Instead of crumbling, I hired a private investigator. Money was no longer an obstacle. Within days, he returned with a file thick enough to crush her illusions. Unpaid credit cards, a failed hustle reselling fake designer handbags, and even a pending lawsuit from a woman she'd scammed. I didn't expose her. Not yet. That wasn't my style. Instead, I sent a single anonymous email. "Stop, or your secrets become headlines." Her online attacks ceased almost immediately. The rumors lost momentum, like embers dying without oxygen. For the moment, she retreated, but I knew she wasn't finished. Months rolled by, and the fallout landed harder on them than I ever could have planned. Their house, the pride of their perfect facade, now stood strangled by weeds, a foreclosure sign nailed to the door like a scarlet letter. I slowed my car as I passed, watching them from behind the wheel. Natalie was shoving boxes into David's dented pickup, her once beloved SUV already repossessed. Margaret and David shuffled across the lawn, faces slack with exhaustion, moving like hollowed shells of who they once pretended to be. I didn't stop. I didn't even roll down the window. I drove to my new home instead, a $2 million penthouse with glass walls, a rooftop terrace, and a garage where my Tesla gleamed beside polished concrete. My 16th property, a commercial lot, was already in negotiation, my inbox full of investors waiting for my response. Margaret's emails kept arriving, pages of apologies and rehearsed remorse. I deleted them unopened. David left voicemails, his voice cracked with desperation. I blocked his number. Natalie plastered social media with captions about resilience while working retail at a craft store, her once perfect image collapsing like a house of cards. I didn't gloat. I simply lived, free in a way they'd never allowed me to be. But fate wasn't finished. A year later, Margaret appeared at my office unannounced. Time had withered her, her eyes were red, her frame frail, her hands shaking as she clutched a worn purse. "Olivia, please," she whispered. "Natalie's pregnant. The father's gone. We're living in a motel. You're the only one who can save us." I leaned back in my chair, a cold smile tugging at my lips. "Funny," I said softly. "You always told me Natalie was the only daughter that mattered. I guess she'll have to figure this out on her own." Her face crumpled, tears spilling freely, but my heart felt like stone. I nodded to security, and they escorted her out while she sobbed my name. That night, as the city glowed beneath my terrace, I sipped wine and told myself I had finally won. But then my phone buzzed. A text. No words, just a photo, of my penthouse. The angle was unmistakable. It was taken from inside, facing the living room. Seconds later, another message arrived. "You can't escape us." My blood ran cold. Someone had been in my home. I didn't need to guess who. The next morning, I fortified my world. Security cameras on every corner, new locks on every door, and a cybersecurity expert combing through my digital life. The truth was worse than I imagined. A hidden app had been installed on one of my old phones years ago, back when Natalie still had access. It tracked my location, my emails, even some of my banking logins. She'd been watching me, silently feeding on my life. I shut it down, but the feeling of violation lingered like smoke in the walls. Then came another blow. My investigator dug deeper and unearthed a betrayal that burned hotter than any rumor. David had stolen from me, quietly siphoning money out of my college savings account, rerouting it into Natalie's endless string of failed ventures. The account I thought was my foundation had been drained before I even stepped on campus. I clenched my fists but stayed calm. Instead of exploding, I went surgical. Through my lawyer, I drafted a letter, evidence of theft, threats of civil charges, and a demand for repayment. Within a week, a cashier's check arrived, $50,000, a pathetic fraction of what was gone. It came with a note. "Please, Olivia. Let's end this." I deposited the money without hesitation. I didn't respond. But I kept the evidence, a weapon tucked neatly away for the day I'd need it. The final showdown came when I least expected it. I was at a real estate conference, on stage receiving an award for Young Investor of the Year. Cameras flashed, applause thundered, my name etched into a place they could never erase. And then, from the crowd, she appeared. Natalie. Gaunt, frantic, eyes burning with a fire that looked less like rage and more like obsession. She approached as I stepped off the stage, her voice a sharp whisper. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "You think you can bury us?" I didn't flinch. Too many eyes were on me. "You buried yourselves," I replied, my tone sharp as glass. "Leave, or I'll have security remove you." She laughed, the sound brittle, manic. "You'll regret this. I still have things on you." I leaned close, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "And I have everything on you, your scams, your debts, your lawsuit. One slip, Natalie, and your world ends completely." Her face blanched. The fury evaporated into something hollow. Without another word, she turned and disappeared into the crowd. 2 years later, my empire stood unshakable. 20 properties, a portfolio worth nearly $5 million, and a reputation that opened every door I knocked on. My Tesla now had company in the garage. A Porsche, bought outright. My team managed deals across the city, my office view stretching over a skyline I'd conquered on my own. Meanwhile, their world rotted. Natalie, abandoned, worked double shifts at a dollar store, her once flashy Instagram abandoned. Margaret and David lived in a rented trailer, their pride long foreclosed. They sent letters, emails, even tried showing up at my building, but security turned them away. I didn't hate them anymore. I pitied them. But pity was not the same as forgiveness. They had chosen their golden child, blinded themselves with favoritism, and left me invisible. Yet I became the one they needed most. Now I stood on my terrace, the city lights glittering below me, the night air cool against my skin. I had carved a life out of neglect, turned dismissal into empire. But even with all my walls, my cameras, my locks, I sometimes caught myself checking the shadows, half expecting another photo, another whisper, another reminder that Natalie's obsession had never truly died. And sometimes, when the silence grew too deep, I wondered, was I cruel for burning their world down? Or was it the only way I could finally live free? And if you think this story hit deep, the next one will leave you speechless. Subscribe now, before you miss it. And if this made you feel something, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it too.